Hello, gorgeous mom leaders. I'm trying to arrange my setup today. Welcome to Conscious Champagne Chat number 51, where we're going to talk about the fear of abandonment. And while every parent needs to know about this, and while speaking of abandonment, I've been abandoned to my into my son's room because our house is full at the moment with kids, and I'm like, I need 10 minutes for quietness, but that's not gonna happen. So I'm sitting here trying to position myself. So welcome ladies, let me know when you're here. Talk to me, and happy Friday to everybody. Let me know where you're tuning in from if you're here for the first time for such a severe topic as the fear of abandonment. No, but I'm serious, you guys. It's a topic that is very dear to my heart, simply because fear of, over the last Conscious Champagne Chats, we've been talking about the different kind of fears that are holding us back to really stand in our true power. As women, as parents, as wives, as professionals, as pretty much everything, because we have just like our entire culture, is based on fear. A lot of it is based on fears, and fear is not something that is obvious to us. It's covered up. And the reason I really want to talk about fear of abandonment is because it is actually the most common fear we have. Everybody of us has it. Every single person has fear of abandonment, just to a certain, to different degrees of severity, so to speak. And fear of abandonment, the reason it is so important to talk about it, especially in the context of parenting, is because it's actually one of the most damaging and destructive fears that keeps us very disconnected to our children. Now, why do we have this fear of abandonment? And quite frankly, why do we have it and don't even really know about it? Because, for me, like, if you've had trauma, like obvious trauma in your childhood, then that is something very obvious. But I never had that. I grew up like in a very loving, caring environment. I have a lot of positive memories from my childhood. But when I started doing this work, I was like, oh my God, I had no idea all this stuff is living inside of me. And so that's why, even if you think this is not an important topic for you and it's not relevant, hear me out, because you will see how, even though it's not obvious to you, it's actually creeping up and showing up in the relationship with your children, with your spouse, and quite frankly also within the relationship with the people at work, whether that is a coworker or your boss. So why do we have fear of abandonment? So there can be several reasons, but I just want to mention three of them. So first of all, there was a strong rejection. Like, you felt a strong rejection for who you actually were as a child. Like, you were, hey there, lovely, how are you? Because you were basically not accepted for who you were. Like, you were either not enough or you were too much. Like, that happens very many to us. And so when we have this fear of rejection, of being accepted for who I am and the way that I am, very often that translates into us relying on other people, especially our partners or later our kids, to validate our own self-worth. That's one reason. The other reason is, like, if you've experienced a dramatic loss of a loved one, that could be like and loss can be simply showing up in a divorce, like your parents got divorced, or it can be also showing up that, one of your parents died. I mean, those are very obvious fears that lead later on to fear of being abandoned and being left alone and experiencing loneliness, right? But the other one, and this happens to all of us, is that we did not get enough emotional or physical care. Most of us grew up, like, if you think about the philosophy back then, we grew up in you had the food that you needed, you had the clothes you needed, and you had a roof over your head. Like, what else do you want? Like, you have everything. I'm giving you everything, right? I'm giving you access to education. And so back in the days, this was like what parenting was about. Like, I'm taking care of you in terms of like I'm really meeting the basic needs of you get food, you get sleep, you get clothes, and you get shelter, right? But growing up, that is just not enough. And our parents had no idea how to attune emotionally and physically to us the way we would have needed it. And again, this is not to blame our parents because they grew up with their own fears as well. And so we just, have taken it on, and now we pass it on to our children as well. And this happens unconsciously. It literally happens unconsciously. And I read a statistic that basically says like even if you are like the best parent, like you really like pay really good attention and you give all the emotional support and the physical support, there's only 30% that actually attune to their kids in the way that they need it. 30%. And I'm part of that, I'm sure. Like, even with my best intentions and everything, we can't always do it right. And that's part of the problem, because the fear of abandonment, all these fears, they drive us, they push us into the need to do things right. But you can't. It's literally like I've completely separated myself from the idea that I can do parenting right. I can do it better, and I can for sure do it worse. But there's no way we can actually ever do it right. So, and that's why it's even more important that we become aware of these fears. So first of all, we learn how to deal with them, and we learn how to befriend them. And once we know how to do that, we can then teach our kids how to do it. Because if we don't, right, here is what happens. And this is the outcome of fear of abandonment. Two ones I want to mention today. What happens is we either turn into the parent that is super overprotective, or the parent that is, or the person that is pushing people away. Now, let me give you examples for both cases and also tell you I was the one who was pushing people away without even realizing it. So how does overprotection show up? So it shows up, for example, that in the way, because fear of abandonment is such a painful experience as a child, that what we do, it shows up for us in the way that we do everything to protect our kids to experience any pain. And the way we do it is by literally controlling everything. Like having full-blown agendas, having a full-time schedule, so they don't have to go and experience through a pain. I had a client of mine, her daughter was not invited to a birthday party by a friend of her, and she got so upset. The mother got so upset that her daughter was not invited to the birthday party that she called the other girl's mother to basically question her and say, like, what's wrong with you? Why are you not inviting my daughter? Like, do you know how she feels? And that actually caused a whole disconnection with her daughter, who felt super embarrassed for her mom doing that. But the reason the mom thought she's doing this out of love, right? She thought, I need to protect my child here. I need to defend her. Like, why are you not inviting her? She's one of her best friends. What's going on? Like, you as the mother of the other girl, you need to make sure that my daughter is being invited. So what's going on? The mother was projecting her own fears of not belonging onto her daughter. The own fears of, oh my God, my daughter is not being liked. My daughter could end up alone on the street. Like, this is like what we're like, the pictures, the dramas were playing out in our head. She projected all that on her daughter, not even realizing that it was her own fears of not fitting in, of not belonging, because that's what happens when we have a fear of abandonment. We try everything to fit in and everything in order to belong, right? This is where the people pleasing comes from as well. And so that's maybe something more obvious that shows up in the work context rather than in the parenting context. Another way overprotection shows up is that you just simply don't trust your kids. You do a lot of the steps for your kids, like you wouldn't give a child like a knife and a fork at the age of 2 because, oh my God, it's too dangerous, right? It's things like that. It's very this is the thing with fears, you guys. They are not presented obviously on a plate, because otherwise you would know, you'd be aware of it, right? They are hidden in disguise, and they show up in like very kind of like tricky behavior, so to speak, that we take as our absolute truth, that we think it's pretty normal not to do, right? But they're actually a cover up for a lot of these fears that are sitting inside of us. Now, the other way fear of abandonment can show up is actually in pushing people away. And this is why, and I fall into that bucket. This is why I never thought like I had fear of abandonment. But when I reflected on it, here is how it showed up for me. Like, I would cheat on my boyfriends first just to make sure that I can say that they didn't leave me before I had a chance to leave them. Like, totally messed up. But that's how it translates. I remember when my husband and I were dating, like the first 4 weeks, and he lived in the UK and I was in Germany doing an internship. And the guy would call me, God bless him, like every day. And on like the fourth day that he called me, and we could say, like it was our early dating days, like I was crazy in love. But I remember like the fourth day in a row he called me, I said to him, stop calling me, I don't miss you. Like, how terrible is that? How terrible is that? That this poor guy, like, he's still around. I married him, right? But that's what I did to him, because I was like scared to let him too close to me, because what if he leaves me? What if he leaves me? So I better put out around all these protection walls and just like push him away from him. And the way, this is how it showed up for me in my relationship. The way it has shown up for my kids and where I had to do a lot of repair work is in anger, right? When I didn't know how to control my children's behavior, instead of accepting and trying to understand what was driving my children's behavior, I didn't know how to fix it. So I would get helpless and I would get angry and I would say things like, I'm going to send you to boarding school. I've literally said this to my husband before. I said either your daughter is going to leave the house or I'm going to leave the house. I told my daughter in the face, I'm going to send you to a boarding school because I just can't have you around anymore, right? I've said terrible things to my daughter like, get out of the car now. I'm going to leave you here. It's like all these things that we threaten them because we don't know, they cause a lot of fear of abandonment. And the reason we say these things is because, first of all, we carry it inside of us unconsciously, and then it translates in the way we show up for our kids, and we just pass it on to them as well. And we don't even know. And it's tiny little statements like this that you're saying out of frustration, right? That you're speaking out loud out of helplessness in that moment. But they can be super, super devastating. And to me, again, I was not beaten up to death, or I was not, I didn't have a terrible experience growing up, but it was these little comments that came from my parents, and they came consistently, and they were kind of hidden and creeping in, that were literally implanted in me. And I just passed them on to my daughter. I passed them on to my son until I started becoming aware of it. And I realized, oh my God, these are not even my words. These are the words that I heard when I grew up, and I couldn't help myself. So how do you break free from this? How do you break free from fear of abandonment? 2 things. The very first one is you have to grieve over yourself, and you have to grieve over your loss, over the fact that you actually did feel lonely, that you did not feel understood, that you thought you were rejected for who you were, and that you were not wanted. Like, how often have we experienced we were not wanted? So you go and say that by literally saying to yourself, one of the things I like to do is do this crossover. And then I sit here like this, and I would just go and say, I'm so sorry you had to go through this. I'm so sorry you felt lonely. I'm so sorry you didn't feel understood, right? I mean, this is where we grieve over that fear. And then the second step, once you've done that, is you got to show yourself compassion, right? And the way I do that, for example, and there's different ways, but just to share you one, is like literally saying, and this is where I go like this and say, I'm not going to leave you. I've got you. I'm always going to be with you. It's like you have to literally reparent yourself, and you have to tell you these things. Like, no matter what you do, no matter how you show up, Marlis, I'm going to be here. I've got your back. And when you heal this in yourself first, you're going to show up completely different for your kids. And instead of building that disconnection that fear of abandonment leads to, you can truly connect with them on a level where you actually empower them, on a level where you see their full worthiness. And it's just way more beautiful. Now, I have to go, again, there's a lot of things I haven't done right in my parenting. And I wish I had known this when my kids were babies, but I didn't. So I have to live with that as well. And I have to go and do a lot of repair work. And I can definitely see in my daughter signs of her not feeling safe in this world because of this, right? But it's never too late. It's still never too late. No matter how old your kids are. It's if you decide you want to start healing this for you, you can pass it on to your kids, and you will also see the changes in them. And it's just really, really beautiful. All right, my loves, I wish you a wonderful weekend, and I will be back here next week where we're going to talk about, somebody asked this, so I'm going to make that a topic for our next Conscious Champagne Chat, to talk about how to actually befriend all these fears and how to move from fears, shifting your fears to courage. Because again, you can't eliminate them completely. It's learning to be with them and befriend them and use them for you so you can really step into your powers. All right? Mwah. Love you. Take care. Have a wonderful weekend with your family. Bye.